My name is R. Crosby Lyles, and this is News from the Can. Little survival tip. If the shit does really hit the fan anytime soon, just remember you can eat Asian carp. Huffington Post, eat the enemy. Link is in the description. The name Asian carp is actually an umbrella term for 4 different species: bighead carp, black carp, grass carp, and silver carp. Some of the larger species can weigh up to 200 pounds and have an uncanny ability to jump out of the water. Females can produce upwards of 2 million eggs, and some of the fish can live for over 20 years. So here's the deal. This is an invasive species. They introduced it back in the 70s, I believe, to keep down algae growth or something like that. Now it's an invasive species, and, they're trying to get rid of them. The Obama administration spent $200 million trying to control their spread, and this is the growth here, this map here on Huffington Post. So that's food, folks. Big head carp down here in Florida. We got them down in Florida and all up the Mississippi. So just eat them. That's what I say. I mean, I've seen video of on some lakes in Utah and stuff like that where they're, very aggressively netting them up and then talking about using them for fertilizer and fish meal and stuff like that. And my understanding is that they're good eating. They taste good. Now, with a caveat here, there's on this Huffington Post article, they have a video here where the guy shows you how to fillet and cook the fish, and he takes out that side vein there. So, it may, if you don't bleed it, what that tells me is, 35 years ago or so, I caught a bonita, a big-ass bonita, and didn't bleed it, and it was pretty gamey. It's got a funky taste to it if you don't bleed them. So I'm thinking that, this is a kind of fish that if you do catch it, you probably want to bleed it really good. And, and this dude actually takes out that side vein. It's a Canadian guy, sounds like. And the chef, and he actually took that side vein out. So that might be a good tip. But hey, if the shit hits the fan and you got to eat Asian carp, just drive your boat down through the canal, and we'll hold up a net, and catch a couple of them. And to hear them tell it and to look at this map, there's an ass pile of them out there. There's millions and millions of tons of carp out there, all up that Mississippi River down here in Florida, all around down here. So it looks like everywhere. Texas, all out here. So, yeah. Just remember that. If you got to eat, you know what I'm saying? Might want to think about eating some carp. And this is, this has been a question in my mind for a long time, because they've had stories about them for years. The fish jumping out of the water and breaking people's arms and noses and stuff because they're heavy and they're like torpedoes coming out of the water. So, and nobody ever said anything about them being edible. It's like, they act like, well, because it's an invasive species, like the fish is, I always wanted to know, what is it, poisonous or something? I mean, does it have a lot of, does it have a lot of mercury in it or something, and it's just never really clear. Nobody really explained that you can eat the fish, and it's really not bad tasting. So there it is. On another note here, shit hitting the fan wise, forecasters predict a near or above normal 2018 Atlantic hurricane season that starts June 1st. So we already have, in case you weren't paying attention, which is understandable, Tropical Storm Alberto. Location is 23.4 north by 84.8 west. And the movement north at 11 knots, 13 miles per hour. So you can see the projected path, and it's just basically going to stay a tropical storm and then make landfall up near the Alabama-Florida border, Muscle Shoals up there, and then turn into a depression and shoot straight up. If you look at Climate Reanalyzer, There's a lot of different sources out there. This is just, I look at this all the time. I kind of sort of keep track of the sea surface temperature anomaly. A lot of cold water out there, a lot of anomalously cool sea surface temperatures. But there's this large warm blob here. The telling thing is that we have this cold blob here. Anybody who's keeping up with it, basically they believe that they're coming out and saying that they think that the thermal halide current is actually shutting down. Thermal halide overturning current is shutting down. So the Gulf Stream has been slowing down. They say it's the slowest that it's been in 1,600 years, and we had a bit of a cold spell back then. If that current slows down, I see some anomalously cool temperatures through the Caribbean Sea and, between up and down here near South Florida and off the coast of Africa. So this is, where we get a lot of development in here, and they're saying it's going to be basically normal. We're going to have a normal season. The fact that we just had some development right in this area is interesting. Who knows what's going to happen? What's interesting to me is when you see these blue colors intermixed with the red, so anomalously cool water surrounded by anomalously warm water, it just looks like overturning. An overturning vortex, if you will. The Gulf Stream current passing over, because you have laminar flow. So as the current passes over the cooler water down deep, then it causes a sideways vortex that allows mixing to take place. You get eddies and things like that where the vortex will form. So when you have situations with the I did a video about this. The Armageddon line had a bit about this. Salt water is a magnetohydrodynamic fluid. It's a conducting fluid. When it's acted upon by a magnetic field, the magnetic field actually can suppress vortex production or enhance vortex production depending on the strength of the magnetic field and the angle of incident of the magnetic field. And something that's going on down here in the South Atlantic, there's this big circulation of magma down here where you have a magnetic field that's actually in opposition to the Earth's geomagnetic field coming from the North Pole. And so there are some effects taking place. Apparently there's a little radiation belt at a lower altitude than that radiation belt is normally situated around the Earth. And it's right here above the South Atlantic. And that's because of this circulation of magma here, creating this magnetic field. The poles are shifting and becoming weaker, and all that stuff has an effect on ocean currents. So we see that the Gulf Stream shutting down, and apparently that's the real deal, that the Gulf Stream is actually shutting down. And it's anybody's guess at that point. That means that the intel that I'm seeing is that, colder winters for sure, colder European winters, and hotter summers, interestingly enough. So it's going to get interesting heading into a grand solar minimum, and which I guess can only explain your cooler water, and of course when you have more evaporation, more clouds, that's also going to cause the equatorial waters to kind of sort of cool down a bit. Got some volcanic activity, Grand solar minimum also means that more cosmic radiation is impacting the Earth, the mantle, and so you end up with more volcanic activity, certain things with planetary alignment. So it's getting interesting, pretty obviously getting interesting. If you watch Mr. MBB 333, and he's done a lot of videos about water anomalies, the water rushing out. They're like having little tsunamis and things in the Great Lakes, various places in the Great Lakes, and that was a while ago. And so a lot of these things can be explained by various kinds of tectonic activity in the magnetic field. So it's getting interesting out there. Anytime that you're pumping material out of the Earth, pumping oil out, or mountaintop removal, of coal, which they do in the United States, and they also do a lot of coal mining in Germany and in Europe and in China, everywhere, and just mining metal ore out of the earth and then hauling it off somewhere else and smelting it, but just digging coal out of the ground and burning it, turning it into a gas where it's evenly distributed over the earth. Well, that changes the rotational inertia of the earth. Imagine that you have your tire on your car. The weights that they put to balance your tire are these tiny little lead weights. When you lose one of those tiny little lead weights, your tire just turns into this vibrating beast on your car, and it's violent. It vibrates violently. Well, the Earth is more plastic than that. So what it'll have a tendency to do is to flex and warp, but it's such a slow process because planetary wise we're moving small quantities, but we're removing these quantities of mass from the crust, from the surface of the earth. So it's like removing those tiny weights from a tire, and instead of the earth bouncing along, there might be some changes to the rotational dynamics, perhaps slight changes over time, but you can only imagine that there's got to be some sort of tectonic changes. There's got to be some sort of tectonic response. And of course, in Oklahoma and areas like that, they're pumping wastewater from fracking down into deep wells, and that's just, there ain't no telling what's going on with that. If it's lubricating the rock faces or causing you're adding pressure, hydraulic pressure. They have man-made induced earthquakes and things, and I just think to myself, that just can't be good. I'm sorry, it just can't be good. And now that the magma is warming, that just means that the whole system is, to me, in my mind, is more lubricated. So more volcanic activity overall, which is going to mean more sulfide in the upper atmosphere, cooler temperatures. There could be some ramifications about deep ocean cracks, activity along these cracks. But anyway, listen, it's all good. I'm not doing fear porn here. Things are going to happen, but you know what? Things are always going to happen. We live on a frickin' planet spinning through space. This is just the way it is. And whatever happens, we're going to deal with it. And it's going to be okay. We will survive. It'll be us, the cockroaches, and the rats, the rodents. Because human beings, just to reiterate, human beings, we didn't just survive because of our brains. We survived because we're one of the most efficient animals on the planet. Caloric intake wise, if you don't need a lot of food to survive, we actually eat way, way, way more than we actually need to. So much so that we're actually sick from it. Anyway, that's all I got. My name is R. Crosby Lyles, and this has been News from the Can. Thanks for watching. See you.